Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going on a truly epic, and I mean literally staggering 530 million year journey. We're going to track the absolute most dramatic, game-changing biological upgrades in the history of life on Earth. I want you to really stop and think about the sheer unfathomable scale of 500 million years. It is deep, deep time. We're going to look at how a very simple, almost rudimentary blueprint evolved through millions of tiny incremental steps into the vast, beautiful diversity of animals we see today. And yeah, that includes us.
To kick things off, I want you to ask yourself, what do you actually have in common with a tiny 3-centimeter-long jawless ocean glider? It's called Mylocune fengjiawa. Now, this little guy swam in the ancient, murky Cambrian oceans over 500 million years ago. No armor, no limbs, not even a real jaw. Yet you and this ancient glider share the exact same baseline biological blueprint. What I mean is the fundamental architectural layout of your body, the way your central nervous system runs right down your back, the way your muscles are organized, that is completely inherited from this exact creature. We are, quite literally, built on the chassis of this ancient jawless swimmer.
So here's our evolutionary roadmap for it today. We're going to trace the major biological upgrades from simple ocean gliders all the way to us. We'll hit the first backbones, the invention of jaws, stepping onto dry land, the amniotic egg breakthrough, the rise of mammals, and finally, the human family tree. Let's start right at the beginning of our lineage with Section 1, the first backbones. Okay, let's dive into this. To be part of our exclusive evolutionary club, the phylum Chordata, you need to have 4 basic traits at some point during your development. You need a notochord, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, pharyngeal slits or clefts, and a muscular post-anal tail. And hey, even if you don't look in the mirror right now and see a tail or gill slits, you absolutely had them when you were a developing embryo. Let's zoom in on that defining feature, the notochord. Originally, this was a firm but flexible rod that gave our early swimming ancestors a solid structure for their muscles to pull against. It let them whip back and forth through the water. But as our ancestors evolved to walk on land and eventually stand totally upright, well, a single stiff rod just wasn't going to cut it. We needed flexibility to bend, and we needed serious shock absorption to handle the vertical weight of gravity. So in humans, this ancient support structure got modified. It's now reduced to the gelatinous discs sandwiched right between your vertebrae. You literally carry this 500-million-year-old evolutionary relic in your spine right now, cushioning every single step you take.
But how did we actually get a true backbone and a complex brain? Well, it all came down to a massive, deep-level molecular upgrade. See, our invertebrate ancestors only had one single set of Hox genes. Now, molecularly speaking, Hox genes are the ultimate master control switches. They literally lay out the basic body plan of an embryo from head to tail. They tell cells exactly where to build a limb or where to form a head. But in early vertebrates, this profound genetic duplication event happened. Basically, a copying error during cell division accidentally duplicated the entire cluster of these genes. Suddenly, early vertebrates had 2 or more sets of Hox genes. And why is that such a game changer? Because when you have a backup copy of a vital gene, that backup is totally free to mutate and experiment without harming the organism. This massive influx of redundant genetic code provided the exact raw material and molecular complexity needed to invent entirely new advanced structures. Things like a true skull, a complex nervous system, and a segmented backbone. It was essentially a molecular software update that completely revolutionized our biological hardware. That perfectly brings us to our next massive upgrade, covered in Section 2, the invention of jaws. Now, what's genuinely fascinating about this upgrade is how evolution actually solves problems. It rarely ever builds from scratch, right? It repurposes existing parts. The group of animals with jaws are known as gnostosomes. But where did these jaws even come from? Well, they evolved by slowly modifying the skeletal rods that previously just sat there holding open the gills. Over millions of years of natural selection, the hinges of these forwardmost gill arches migrated forward and became articulated. Evolution took a passive filter-feeding breathing apparatus and turned it into a dynamic snapping weapon. Your jaw is essentially a heavily repurposed gill support. How wild is that? And just how much of a weapon was this new invention? Well, 560. That is the jaw-dropping bite force in kilograms per square centimeter of an ancient, heavily armored fish called Dunkleosteus. To put that into perspective, that is roughly 8,000 pounds per square inch of pure bone-crushing power.
Imagine swimming in the Devonian Oceans, surrounded by completely passive filter feeders, and suddenly coming face to face with a predator wielding that kind of mechanical force. The invention of the jaw completely changed the rules of the ocean. It launched a massive evolutionary arms race, allowing vertebrates to slice, grip, chew, and absolutely dominate the oceanic food chain. So let's move to our next section, Section 3, Stepping onto Dry Land, to see how this body plan adapts to a completely alien environment. Around 365 million years ago, some intrepid explorers left the water. Check out Tiktaalik here. It perfectly straddles the line between water and land. It's a true fishapod. On the one hand, it clearly has fish-like traits, right? Scales, fins, gills. But on the other hand, it has a distinct neck, heavy ribs to support its internal organs outside the buoyancy of water, and, most incredibly, the exact same limb-bone structure, a humerus, radius, ulna, and wrist, that you have in your own arm today. Now, why on earth did a fish need a wrist? Well, in the shallow, swampy margins of early continents, a robust wrist joint allowed these creatures to push themselves up out of the muck, peer over the water's surface, and eventually drag their bodies right onto the muddy banks. Evolution essentially bolted terrestrial shock absorbers onto a fish chassis to bridge two completely different worlds. But amphibians were still tied to the water to lay their eggs. To truly conquer the dry continents, we needed the innovation in Section 4, the amniotic egg breakthrough. This right here was the ultimate biological invention. The amniotic egg is essentially a private portable pond, packing an incredibly elegant life support system. You've got the amnion acting as a hydraulic shock absorber for the delicate embryo. But molecularly, the real magic happens with the chorion and the allantois. The chorion is this highly specialized membrane that allows for active gas exchange. It lets vital oxygen slip in through the shell and carbon dioxide slip out, all while forming a molecular barrier that completely stops the precious water inside from evaporating into the dry air. Meanwhile, the allantois acts as a highly efficient, sealed disposal sac, safely sequestering toxic metabolic waste away from the growing embryo. By packing the pond inside a highly engineered shell, our ancestors were finally untethered from the water's edge. They were free to roam and conquer the driest deserts and the deepest forests. For millions of years, reptiles, specifically the dinosaurs, absolutely ruled the Earth. But 66 million years ago, an asteroid wiped them out, leaving a massive vacuum. This kicks off Section 5, the rise of mammals. So the crucial takeaway here is that mammals survived and actually thrived through a massive extinction event by applying some intense upgrades to the amnio body plan. We developed mammary glands to actively nourish our young. We developed hair and subcutaneous fat to generate and trap our own body heat, making us endothermic. We even evolved hyper-efficient kidneys to conserve water. And incredibly, as mammalian jaws became highly specialized for chewing, some of the bones that used to sit in the rear of the reptilian jaw hinge just weren't needed for eating anymore. Through natural selection, these tiny calcium structures were pushed back and remodeled into the malleus, incus, and stapes, the microscopic bones of our inner ear. This gave early mammals hyper-acute hearing, letting them hunt insects in the pitch black of night while the dinosaurs slept. Once again, it's evolution brilliantly repurposing old parts to create entirely new senses. As mammals took over the globe, they iterated wildly on how they reproduced. This was really driven by an evolutionary arms race that favored protecting vulnerable young inside the body. First came the monotremes, like the platypus, which actually still lay physical eggs but produce milk. Then came the marsupials, like kangaroos, who ditch the shell and give birth to tiny, highly underdeveloped embryos that have to crawl into a pouch to safely finish growing. Finally, the eutherians, or placental mammals, arrived. And hey, that's us. We developed a highly complex molecular barrier called the placenta. This incredible organ intricately weaves the mother's blood supply with the fetuses, completely bypassing the immune system and allowing for long, sustained internal pregnancies. And because of this, we could give birth to larger, highly developed, and neurologically complex young straight out of the gate. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 6, the human family tree. Let's zoom right in on our specific branch, the primates, the hominins, and the rise of Homo sapiens. Okay, we need to clear something up right now. You know that classic image of human evolution, the one showing a straight line of chimpanzees marching forward and turning directly into modern humans? Yeah, that is completely a myth. The reality is a highly branched, incredibly messy evolutionary tree. Humans did not evolve from modern chimpanzees. Rather, we share a distant, extinct common ancestor from millions of years ago. What's even wilder is that for the vast majority of our history, multiple, completely different hominin species walked the Earth at the exact same time. We literally shared this planet with Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others. We interacted, we competed, we even interbred. Our history is definitely not a single-file line, it's a tangled, overlapping bush. Now, if we look really closely at the molecular details, the difference between us and our closest living relatives is honestly astonishingly small. We actually share roughly 99% of our genetic code with modern chimpanzees. So how on earth do we explain the massive physical differences between us? How do we explain our hairless skin, our enormous cerebral cortex, or our ability to walk perfectly upright on two legs? Well, it all comes down to minute molecular tweaks and how our DNA is read. Recent molecular data shows that differences in the expression of just 19 specific regulatory genes heavily influence these massive structural shifts. You see, regulatory genes don't build proteins themselves. They act like microscopic volume dials, turning the expression of other genes up or down, on or off. By simply tweaking the timing and volume of these 19 master control switches during embryonic development, evolution literally reprogrammed the standard 8 body plan into a human one. It fundamentally restructured our pelvis and spine to unlock perfect bipedalism. It's just incredible.
And that brings us to exactly where we are today. We are the very last surviving branch of a highly complex, wildly diverse hominin family tree. In every single one of your cells, you are carrying genetic code that traces back 530 million years to a tiny, jawless ocean glider. Over 500 million years, we've bolted on gripping jaws, terrestrial limbs, private portable ponds, inner ear bones forged from reptile jaws, and a massive computationally heavy brain. It is an absolutely incredible legacy. But it leaves us with one final, deeply provocative question to ponder. With all of this unbelievable evolutionary momentum behind us, where does evolution take our biology next? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it leaves you completely fascinated and hungry to learn more.